Hello, Blueshirt Bandwidth listeners. This is Eric. I just want to give you a heads up that this episode is going to be a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of an episode. Here's the deal. Joe and I recorded an interview with Scott Wheeler from The Athletic about prospects and who the Rangers should be looking at given the draft picks that they will have in the upcoming draft, as well as some look at some of the prospects that are already in the Rangers system, a look at his organizational farm system rankings. We recorded that, and then for various reasons, mostly owing to my travel schedule, Joe and Chip recorded the majority of the rest of the episode. But also, they did not record the Ombudsman report. So at some point, you will hear me jump in the middle of that with the Ombudsman report. So you'll get the full episode. You'll get Joe and Chip. You'll get Charlie's Ombudsman report. You'll get the interview that we did with Scott Wheeler. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of hopping around between different people. So just giving you a heads up before you start listening to the episode that that's what it's going to be like. Otherwise, enjoy.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Blueshirt's Bandwidth. And the pause was because I don't remember what number this is.
78.
78. Wow. We've done this 78 weeks in a row for all of you people. As you heard or saw, if you're watching on Spotify, we were joined, or I'm joined, not by Eric Cohn, that son of a bitch, but instead by Chip. Chip, how are you?
Different son of a bitch.
Different son of a bitch.
I'm just a different son of a bitch.
Couple of housekeeping notes here. We had our travel schedule completely screwed up. So Chip and I are recording now. We have a guest, as you've likely seen in the title already, which is Scott Wheeler from The Athletic, one of the best prospect guys in the business, quite frankly. We're going to throw to that interview in probably 20 minutes or so. I think Chip and I are just going to do a little bit of New York Rangers talk right now for you and then move on to the Scott Wheeler interview. Because of this, we did not get the question thread out to you quick enough. So I am aware that there is a question thread up right now, but I wouldn't ask questions in it because, and actually I don't even know why I'm saying that to you. By the time you listen to this, the question thread will have already not been up. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you did ask questions in the question thread, I apologize. We did not mean to put it up. It got up later than we thought. So that's all. As for the show itself, Chip and I are going to do a little bit of Rangers talk, and then we will move forward with just some NHL talk. Some interesting things happen. Always good when John Tortorella gets back in your life. Anyway, let's start here. BlueshirtBandwidth.com, $85 a year, get you all of your ad-free access to the New York Rangers. $40 a year, get you access to our Discord tier. You can ask questions in the ironic question thread that we're not going to be able to reference today. Although if some of you ask questions, I think there's one question in there. We will take it at the end of the show. So there you go.
All right, here we go with the Blueshirt Bandwidth podcast Ombudsman report for episode 77, where each week Charlie Vidal listens to the latest episode of the podcast and corrects the record on anything that Joe and I got wrong. Starting with 90s nostalgia. While talking about the 1990s, the decade as a whole, not the final 3 seasons of Rangers hockey that it contained, Eric said that, quote, the 90s were pretty great. It needs to be clarified that Eric's positive perception of the 90s is colored by the fact that he didn't have actual responsibilities and his body wasn't in constant pain. 9 shots on goal. The Rangers were held to a paltry 10 shots on goal against the Ottawa Senators last Monday, March 23rd. As Eric tweeted out from his personal account, 17 times this season, a player has had 10 or more shots on goal individually. 4 players, Rupe Hintz, Kirill Kaprizov, Matthew Coronato, and Jack Hughes, have all had more shots in a single game this season than the Rangers did against the Ottawa Senators. Additionally, Alex Ovechkin has had 11 or more shots on goal in a single game 27 times throughout his career. Lafreniere shooting percentage. During the discussion on Alexis Lafreniere's recent hot streak, it was mentioned that, quote, at the beginning of the year, he was shooting at 6%. I actually investigated the team's shooting percentages early in the season. Through 14 games on November 6th, Lafreniere had a 3.3% shooting percentage. He increased it to 12% by December 30th and is now at 14.8% on the season, which is slightly above his career average of 13.7%. During his early March heater, where he had 14 points in 10 games, March 2nd versus Columbus and March 19th versus Columbus, Lafreniere had a 25% shooting percentage, 7 goals on 28 shots on goal. JT Miller buyout. Joe said that, quote, I don't think that you can buy out a player with a no movement clause. From an explanation of the NHL CBA, quote, a no movement clause does not restrict a team from buying out or terminating a player's contract. Mika's career. During the discussion of the Mika Zibanejad trade and how it was one of the best trades that the Rangers ever made, Eric brought up the point that in the banter Slack that Mika now has 809 points in his age 32 season. And of the 53 players who have reached that many points at this young of an age, only 3 are not in the Hall of Fame despite being eligible. Those players are Bobby Smith, Bernie Nichols, and Vincent Damphousse. Below is a list of the 52 players with their point totals through their age 32 seasons. And you can check that out in the report itself. Interestingly, Hockey Reference has Mika's top 5 comparable players as Taylor Hall, Jacques Lemaire, a Hall of Famer, Jonathan Huberdeau, Frank Mihaljevic, Hall of Famer, and Alexei Yashin. Dylan Garand. While discussing why Dylan Garand is only recently got his first NHL start, despite Igor's injury earlier in the season, it was mentioned that Garand was not at the top of his game in January, which is why Spencer Martin was called up instead. Spencer Martin got his first start of the season on January 17th against the Philadelphia Flyers. In Dylan Garand's 3 games prior to January 17th in Hartford, he gave up 6 goals on 30 shots, January 9th against Springfield, 5 goals on 33 shots, January 11th at Bridgeport, and 3 goals on 24 shots, January 16th at Wilkes-Barre Scranton. In Garand's last 3 starts prior to being called up for his NHL debut last week, he gave up 2 goals on 29 shots, that's March 13th versus Cleveland, 2 goals on 32 shots, March 17th at Charlotte, and 2 goals on 22 shots, March 18th at Charlotte. Oilers mess. While discussing the mess that is the Edmonton Oilers, Eric mentioned that Tristan Jarry is hated by his teammates. This sentiment stems from a March report by Elliot Friedman that Jarry was, quote, getting into it with teammates at practice. The Oilers acquired Jarry for their prior underachieving goalie, Stuart Skinner, in December. Since then, Skinner's play has rebounded in Pittsburgh, while Jarry is a solidly below expectations goaltender. Eric also mentioned that Trent Frederick's contract is terrible. Frederick signed an 8-year contract with an AAV of $3.85 million this past offseason. Frederick has not had a great season, scoring 4 goals and 2 assists in 67 games, while being a below replacement level player per Evolving Hockey. And that concludes the Podcast Ombudsman Report.
The New York Rangers, Chip, have won 2 games in a row.
That they have.
Very annoying games because they won against Chicago that put them into 3rd place in the lottery odds. Then they beat Florida in was this seriously the Eastern Conference Final 2 years ago matchup. I fucking hate this team in more ways than I can count. But as you and I will ultimately discuss, there is something to be said for the children doing children things. So, Chip, what are your thoughts on the Rangers destroying their lottery odds while the kids kind of do good things?
Speaking of children, the only Ranger who has worn 78 is a child, Brennan Othmann. So there you go.
Well,
if you want to talk about
count.
if you want to talk about annoying, there's Brennan Othmann.
You know
this
what?
is the Brennan Othmann episode.
Yeah, can we stick on Brennan Othmann for a minute? I'm glad you brought
Absolutely.
this up. The Brennan Othmann, made it clear that he wanted to leave the Rangers earlier this year. Cool. If you were a better hockey player, that probably would have been easier. I like Brennan Othmann as a person. I think he was a perfectly fine draft pick for the Rangers to make. He definitely got fucked over by a couple of really stupid rules that ended up happening with the AHL age and, everything else that ended up impacting him and not allowing him to reach the NHL quicker. I get it. He definitely didn't get the best looks while he was with the organization, but you can't say the guy had no chances. He scored a single goal in over, 48 games, I think he ended up playing.
Yeah, I'm sick of the narrative that the Rangers don't give kids chances. They do. And, people say, yeah, Adam Sikora is getting a chance now. Yaro Hlanash is getting a chance now because
Hamelish. Eric and I have had Hamelish.
You've gone to school on this. Hamelish.
I've gone to school on this. Well, somebody needs to explain to me how that series of letters equals that name. I don't understand.
It's just a fuck around and find out version of spelling. That's all there is to it.
It is Hamelish. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yes, they're getting their looks now because, the Rangers have made some trades, cleared some veterans off. But that wasn't the case when Noah Laba got his chance. Noah Laba had to beat out veterans. He had to beat out Johnny Brodzinski, and he had to beat out UC Parsonen to win that 3C spot, and he's held it all year. Matt Robertson, he had to beat out Urho Vakanainen and for a little while there Carson Soucy to get his playing time, and he did. The Rangers do give kids chances. You just have to fucking do something with them. My bigger problem is the Rangers seem to be attracted to these kids in the first round, whether it's Othmann, Kravtsov, Lias Anderson, who think that being a first-round pick guarantees you a spot in the NHL lineup, and you don't have to keep playing to hold that spot, and you do. And so, to me, this has always been a bigger issue with drafting than development. And good for Brennan Othmann. He's gone. I think that this is not the first time he's complained his way into a bad situation. He was traded from Flint to Peterborough in juniors because of his attitude. That last year he played in juniors. I hope it works out for Othmann in Calgary. I think he scored a goal last night. Good for him.
Yeah, I'm not looking to shit on the kid. I do think that Brennan Othmann got a bad rap. I think he had a pretty unfortunate series of events that kind of plagued him. He was hurt when there was an opportunity for him to kind of step into a role with the Rangers. There was the injury pieces, who he was playing with from a line perspective. I get it. I understand the case for Brennan Othmann didn't get the best shake with the Rangers. The piece of it that's kind of irking me a little bit is every single Ranger that leaves the organization has things to say about the Rangers. I just don't understand. Brennan Othmann, of all people, I'm not sure you should probably sit this one out, I think, is the more important piece here, because it's not look, I will make the argument that the Rangers could have done a better job with Brennan Othmann in terms of development, in terms of the positions that they put him in. Most of the games that he played when Peter Laviolette was the head coach 2 years ago, where he got a bulk of his NHL experience with the Rangers, was on the fourth line. I understand. I am accepting those arguments. But the other piece of this is you were given opportunities. You did not do anything with those opportunities. There are consequences for those actions. I'm sorry. And Brennan Othmann was given a wide open runway to make the New York Rangers this year out of camp. And you know what he did in preseason? He sucked. So again, I feel bad for him. There's been a lot of discourse that's come out about the way that he sulked, about not being able to go to the AHL a few years ago and what sort of set him back. I get all of these things. I understand. But at some point, you have to blame the player. And I think with Brennan Othmann, we're at a point where we have to blame the player. Now,
I was going to say the inevitable pushback is, yeah, Brennan Othmann didn't produce and he was banished to the AHL. There are veterans who didn't produce and kept getting spots in the lineup. And to that, I'll say, you know what? Sometimes a veteran's track record does count for something. It just does.
Yeah, and the other point I'm going to make, so that it's not completely carrying water for the organization. I think the way Mike Sullivan is handling Scott Morrow this year is an atrocity. And that's another guy that you can make the argument really hasn't done a ton with the opportunities that he's had. Scott Wheeler and I and Eric talk about this more extensively. You'll hear that in a couple of minutes, where even Scott thinks that he hasn't nearly been as bad as the Rangers seem to think he's been. And I'm more concerned about players that we know the Rangers are going to have this year, or excuse me, next year. And Scott Morrow is one of those players. Brennan Othmann is not one of those players.
Yeah, that's
So
fair.
I just, this wouldn't even be a discussion if he was not making the comments that he was making. And it's not like, look, it's not like he's outwardly shitting on the Rangers, but yeah, you wanted a fresh start. So did the Rangers. If you played better hockey, we, would have been there. So, all right, let's get back to the topic at hand. The New York Rangers crushed Chicago. They won one of those you don't really want to win games this way games with Florida, where, yeah, I guess, Adam Skora scored a goal. Cool. It was basically the Igor Shesterkin show. So, Chip, you and I have differing opinions on this. What are your thoughts on the Rangers crushing the tank here? And I just want to make one point clear. And we're going to go into this a little bit more with Scott Wheeler. So you guys are going to hear it, and you're going to understand my point in a little bit more depth. There's really two needle-moving wingers in this draft class, and they're going 1-2. Then it's a bunch of defensemen. And then a lot of the other names you've heard, like Malhotra, are basically not really at that level. And Scott's going to give you his thoughts, but it's really Malhotra and Lawrence, who was much higher up on the depth chart, or the draft chart, I should say. But those are the two centers, the two BU boys. If the Rangers were to finish today in third, they have an 11.5 chance to win the draft lottery, which is, fine. Or excuse me, I think it's 11.6% chance to win the draft lottery, fine. But they can drop from third to fifth. You can fall down 2 places at that level. That's where the problem comes in for me. Now, second to fourth is still the same issue, because you're really there's the 2 wingers and then there's the defenseman. And that's the top of the draft chart. So it's going to be probably McKenna, Stenberg, and then Verhoff. Is that it?
Verhoff.
So those are the 3. Now, some of you don't want the Rangers to draft a defenseman. Sorry, if they're picking third, they have to. You have to take best player available, unless you're trading back and trying to figure out what you're doing from that point. But I don't. It's fine when Perreault and Lafreniere and Sikora are doing the things. I just have trouble stomaching the way the Rangers beat Florida. And I want your thoughts on this.
No, I don't disagree with that point. I said very early on, if it's the kids who are carrying the Rangers to victory, awesome, because that to me is important. You know, having a team come back next year with guys like Sikora, Hemela, which I just completely butchered because now Hemelish, Perreault, and Lafreniere, feeling good about their games, confident about their games. That's important. I don't need, the game-winning goal to be a shorthanded goal by Connor Sheary, and have Igor backstop them to a game they probably should not have won. That being said, I'm always going to be happy about beating the shit out of Florida because Florida's fucking annoying. So I can't get too upset about it. I don't mind the Rangers drafting Verhoff or Chase Reed if they miss out on 1 or 2, because I don't think that that Will Borgen's going to be around for much longer. I don't think that Braden Schneider is going to be around for much longer. I'm not sold on Scott Morrow being much more than a right shot Zach Jones, unless he can prove that he can actually play defense as a defenseman. So if you're telling me that we can get Verhoff, with the 3rd or 4th pick, awesome. I'll sign up for it today, and I'll use other assets to go out and get, go out and get a forward who can play in the top 6. I think they've got, really what they need is they just need one top 6 winger right now because the 2 centers aren't going anywhere, and no one in the draft, until you get to Malhotra and Lawrence, is a center. So you're locked in with Mika and JT Miller probably as your top 2 centers next year anyway. None of the guys behind McKenna and Sternberg are going to be in the NHL probably next year. And so if you look at maybe a year from now, Malhotra, joining the Rangers, I'm okay with that. If you talk about Verhoff or Reed replacing Borgen or Schneider at the two right D spot behind Fox, I'm okay with that too. So yeah, winning the way they won in Florida is annoying, but I'm not like, yes, obviously I would love Gavin McKenna. I would love Sternberg. If we don't get those two, it's not like, it's not like a couple of years ago where it was Schaefer and then, like 3 other guys and then nothing.
Yeah, the bigger issue here is if the Rangers don't get one of those 2 wingers, the logical place that you got to, which is, hey, they only have to add like a couple of pieces, whatever. None of those pieces exist on the free agent market. And unless Jason Robertson or Brady Tkachuk are going to help the Rangers here, I don't foresee them making their way to the Rangers anyway. The bigger issue as well is you have to give to get, and it's really hard to find a trade where the Rangers are going to get a difference maker that doesn't include Alexis Lafreniere. And I just don't know. I don't even know if those guys are available at that point anyway. So for me, and this is totally luck related, there's nothing the Rangers can do aside from lose games. It's also part of the reason why I don't understand why we are not just letting the kids run rampant these final 10 games. There is no benefit to winning hockey games right now. You're not making the playoffs. It does not matter. Play Scott Morrow. Sit Will Borgen. Sit Connor Sheary. I don't need Connor Sheary scoring goals in hockey games where the Rangers kind of need to lose for the tank. It is the worst way for the Rangers to be winning games. And it is actively damaging their chances. And again, it's a lottery. The Islanders won the lottery and they were, I think, in the 10 slot last year. Like, it can happen. But I'm confused why we're not trying to gather more data about the players that we know are going to be here next year, or at least would like to hope are going to be here next year. I'd like to know a little bit more information about Scott Morrow. I'd like to know a little bit more information. Getting the look at Sikora is great. Totally fine. I have no issues with this. I think he's a depth guy, which again is fine. I'm not shitting on the kid. Like, he should. You're going to need players like him and Noah Laba. Stanley Cup winning teams have guys like that who make their hay just plying their trade on the third line. It's okay. Those are fine, but they're not difference makers. There's zero reason Gabe Perreault should not be playing on the top power play unit. Zero. Just like there was zero reason that Scott Morrow should not have been quarterbacking the top power play unit. Vladislav Gavrikov is your power play quarterback 1 while Adam Fox is injured? For what? What do you gain from this?
You aren't making good arguments. And on the lottery, real quick, didn't the Rangers have like a 1% chance of winning the lottery the year they won the lottery and got Lafreniere?
It wasn't that low. We're going to get Charlied here, which is okay. The Rangers were in the play-in. This was during the COVID season. So the Rangers were in the play-in. They lost to Carolina. My understanding was when the draft pieces were selected, the Rangers fell into one of those lottery spots, but it was like a mystery spot. Yeah. So when the Rangers lost, they fell into that spot and nobody knew what it was going to be. And then it turned into the first overall pick. But, it's also worth noting that Scott will talk about those 2 guys, those 2 wingers at the top. And they're needle movers. They're not on the level of Nathan McKinnon.
No, they're not. It's more like winning the Alexis Lafreniere draft.
If Alexis Lafreniere pans out. So, and listen, I'd much rather have him, but the easiest solution for the Rangers to get to a place where they are a little bit more competitive next year, where Adam Fox is not necessarily looking for ways to escape, where the Rangers have at least a few really positive things going for them, is to win the draft lottery. And I just want to make this point clear, not to cut you off. I understand you can't control it. I get it. I get that it's a lottery. I understand that there's no way for Mike Sullivan or Chris Drury to press a button and win the lottery. What I do not understand is you should be giving the children I don't care that it makes the team worse. I don't care that Mike Sullivan doesn't think Scott Morrow is worth the time at the NHL level right now. Figure it the fuck out, Buttercup. Sorry. If he makes you lose games, all the better.
So you are hitting on what I think is the disconnect between fans and coaches and players.
Yeah, you're going to make the Eric argument now. I can't escape him.
No, you can't. It is fine for us to think about the tank and to think about, Gavin McKenna and doing all that. But Adam Fox doesn't give a shit about Gavin McKenna. Adam Fox wants to win games.
Then I think he kind of gives a shit about Gavin McKenna,
I think he wants to see that there's a future with this team. And I think the way they're playing, even in this stretch, is showing him, okay, things could be good. The Adam Fox thing is a whole different thing, because I think Adam Fox's decision basically comes down to, do I want to have more control over my destiny now, or wait until my no movement clause becomes a no trade clause and then I lose control? So I think that's the Adam Fox thing. For Sullivan, by playing Connor Sheary and letting Connor Sheary show that he is someone who is worth another contract, people in the room respect that. Same way they respect the fact that he's playing Johnny Brodzinski, and Johnny Brodzinski is a team favorite, right? And we don't need to see Johnny Brodzinski play, but he is playing Johnny Brodzinski, and by playing Johnny Brodzinski, he is continuing to build his own trust within that room. Playing, JT Miller the way he is, playing Igor. Igor could take the rest of this with 3 goalies up. Igor could take the rest of the season off, and they could rotate in. Now that he's healthy, they could rotate Garand and Quick. Like Quick go out with.
Who's been great, by the way. Garand has been fantastic.
Garand has been fantastic. I don't know why he wasn't up before Spencer Martin, but whatever. I just think that there's more politics, there's more of a dynamic that goes into it in the room that says, I want to work with Will Borden on maybe waiving his no trade clause and moving him this summer, so I'm not also going to insult him by benching him for the rest of this season, so I can see Scott Morrow, who I can watch.
Wouldn't that make him want to waive his no trade clause more, though?
Well, he's got a partial, but maybe you can get.
Well, no, right. I think today he has a no trade clause
it's
full.
Yeah, and today it's full. July 1 it becomes partial.
Yeah, I get the argument. I really do. I understand the thought process behind it. And Mike Sullivan is also coaching for next year with the players that he has, rather than the mystery box that Gavin McKenna or anyone else in the draft pick could be. I understand all of that. I really do. I get it. I'm not making the argument that that's not what's going on here. The argument that I am making is the Rangers have made a series of decisions that we know aren't going to help them in any way, shape, or form. One of those decisions is Connor Sheary playing meaningful minutes in hockey games. I don't want Connor Sheary back next year. I don't think he helps. I don't think he gives the Rangers anything they need. He was here for basically a Stanley Cup mindset, and now the Rangers are not making the Stanley Cup playoffs, so it doesn't matter. So let's just move on with our lives in the kit. Why does I get you don't want to piss off JT Miller. I understand the argument that JT Miller is probably going to help you try to convince some of these people that you need them to come over and, come over from Team USA. I get it. I do. I understand all these things. But I'm having a really hard time with this just seeing some of these players that I don't need to see, and the Rangers winning games that they're winning in the ways that you don't need them to win, and it's hurting their lottery odds.
It is. Look, I would be fine with Shiri, with Taylor Radish, all being benched, for the rest of the season, and seeing more of Sikora, bring up some other kids. I don't think Shiri will be back next year. I think Brodzinski might be back next year. I think the way the Rangers have been winning and the way that Ty Cartier and Hemlash and Hemelish and Sikora have been playing spells really bad things for Matt Rempe's future as a Ranger. But I do get why Sullivan is playing them.
Well, I mean, let's talk about Rempe for a second. Do we think Matt Rempe is going to be a New York Ranger next year?
I don't see a spot for him.
I don't know what. There were vibes with Matt Rempe. Mike Sullivan in the beginning of the year really, really liked Matt Rempe. I don't know if I would much, much, much rather have Adam Sikora here, Adam Edstrom here. You don't have Sam Carrick anymore, obviously, but I don't think I need to see anything else from Matt Rempe, to be completely honest with you. And I'm good there. The injury obviously doesn't help through this situation. I get that too, but the Rangers are the Rangers. Matt Rempe is not necessarily going to help them win hockey games here.
No, and if you listen to the way Sullivan talks about Hemelish and
there you go.
Hemelish and Sikora, he really likes these players. He really likes them. And if you're only going to carry 13 forwards, you want your 13th forward to be someone who can slot it at center. Rempe can't do that. So I don't see a path for him to get on the ice for the Rangers. And it's the NHL. Some team will trade for him. Some team will give you a fifth or sixth round pick for Matt Rempe because he's 6'9" and can, drop the gloves on a moment's notice. I don't see a problem trading him.
You also don't need to get a lot for him. There was not a big investment here. And look, Hemelish, Sikora, even Berard, there are definitely there are aspects to this here where those are younger players who I think have made an impact for the Rangers. Again, at a depth level, but that's okay. It's Adam Sikora is infectious. The way he reacted when he scored that goal, Mike Sullivan I put it in my notes story that you can read if you're a subscriber to Blueshirt Bandwidth. He's never had a bad day in his life. And trust me when I tell you, the Rangers desperately need that type of thought process here, for sure. They need those types of vibes. They absolutely do. But those guys are not going to be the needle movers that we're talking about when we're talking about the Rangers, figuring out whether or not they're going to be successful sooner rather than later. You had an argument when the Rangers were winning hockey games and Gabe Perreault and Alexis Lafreniere were on their absolute heater that hey, this is sort of the blueprint for the Rangers to become competitive a little bit quicker. If these things are going and trending in the directions that we think they are, the Rangers actually have the building blocks here for a playoff hockey team. They have an elite goaltender. They have an elite puck-moving defenseman. They have an elite top pair. Those are good things and good starting points. They also have a top line that at the time and still to this day have been really, really productive.
Yeah. And they have a really good bottom six. You can see a bottom six next year that's Cooley, Laba, and either Greentree or Sikora, and a fourth line that's Cartier, Edstrom, and Hemelish. That's a really good bottom six for any team. And it's young and it costs you no money. And by the way, if you're looking at it that way, you've got I don't know that Greentree is going to be a guy who comes in and is in the top six right away next season. He could be, especially if you're a team that thinks you're going to retool. Yeah, if you're the Rangers where they are, Greentree could very easily make a case for being in the top 6 next year. So, you assume no trades, right? You've got Greentree and Miller and Trocheck as your second line. That's not terrible, right?
Hard
And
to
there
assume
will be
Trocheck
trades.
is still on the team next year, though.
It is hard to assume that, which is there will be trades. There will also be free agent signings. I know the free agent
Will there be
market.
like what out? This is the other piece of this that I think is becoming increasingly interesting. Outside of Alex Tuch,
Mhm.
whatever.
Tuck.
There is no one available in the free agent marketplace, which means I actually do think Vincent Trocheck is going to be a pretty valuable trade commodity.
Yeah, I agree. He's going to be valuable. I'm going to have a piece coming out soon as I get my ass together and write it, about some of the guys who are kind of like Anthony Mantha was last year, undervalued guys who are going to be on the free agent market, either as UFAs or RFAs. Anthony Mantha signed for, I think it was like $1.5 million. I could be wrong about that. On a 1-year contract with Pittsburgh. He's been great for them. And so the Rangers, there are a couple players out there that the Rangers could target in that sort of same vein. And then there are a couple of restricted free agents who, a few years ago, Dylan Strome was cut loose by the Chicago Blackhawks when he was a RFA with arbitration rights, and they decided to not qualify him. So I'm going to look at a couple of players in that boat too, who could be really good fits for the Rangers, guys who have talent, have draft pedigree, and just haven't put it together, and could fit what the Rangers need. And could, if all goes, that's a lot of ifs, I get it, but could, if all goes well, be a top 6 player like Dylan Strome is for Washington, like Anthony Mantha is for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, the only players that the Rangers should be going after on the free agent market are either the reclamation projects that you're talking about,
Mhm.
or that's honestly kind of the end of the list, because there's no reason for the Rangers to bring in depth guys. Connor Sheary, as an example, would theoretically take a spot away from Adam Sikora next year, right? I don't need him here. I'm good. Because the point that you made about the Rangers' bottom 6 actually starting to line up from a and listen, this is something we've talked about pretty much all year as well. The weird part is the Rangers have gotten their shit together from a like a depth perspective this year. And I get that part of that was like Matt Rempe was playing really well, and there were a couple of other things that were working out for the Rangers, but like we've really had no issues with the depth perspective of the team this year. Noah Lobb has been a revelation down there. I think Adam Edstrom has been really good. Sam Carrick obviously helped. He's not here anymore. So like there's adjustments that are going to need to be made. But I think if you have a bottom 6 that is loaded with, Noah Laba, Will Cooley fits better as a third line player. The Rangers really haven't been able to utilize him that way because, again, the Rangers have no talent pretty much in the top 6. And they may have even less of it if Vincent Trocheck is traded this summer like we think he's going to be. But that, again, is part of that, like, it's just part of that bigger piece here. And I just think the Rangers are in a good spot from a depth perspective. I don't need to see anything else come in from a, I don't need to see anything else come in from a free agent perspective, unless you're getting a younger player that's actually going to be like a reclamation project that you may be able to have for years on end. Like Minnesota going out and getting Bobby Brink from Philadelphia is exactly the type of move the Rangers should be making if they had assets to make those moves, which they don't.
Yeah, I don't need another Taylor Radish signing.
No,
I don't need the
absolutely
Rangers.
not. I don't need Taylor Radish here now.
No, I don't need the Rangers to go out and overpay for Ellie Tolvanen, who's a free agent out of Seattle. Mostly because he's a smaller version of Will Cooley. He's going to hit everything. He's going to put in a bunch of goals. But I've already got Will Cooley. I don't need to pay Ellie Tolvanen a premium to come here because he's one of the better players on a really thin free agent market. Guy like Patrick Laine, so talk about a reclamation project. He all things go well, Patrick Laine on your second line putting pucks in the back of the net for $1.5 million. That's not a bad thing.
This brings up the other piece, and this will be the last piece we talk about before we go to Scott. The Rangers have cap space. They should weaponize that cap space.
Yes, they should.
There's no reason for them not to weaponize that cap space this year. If you need to be an arms dealer to facilitate some trades that happen during the offseason, if you want to take on bad contracts for the next year or two, totally fine. No reason not to be doing those things.
You want to eat 50% of Will Borgen's contract to trade him? Go ahead.
By all means. We are going to throw to Scott Wheeler. It was a great interview. I really like Scott. He is an old, as we discussed, comrade in arms with SB Nation. Used to run Pension Plan Puppets, which was the Maple Leaf site. We do not talk about the Maple Leafs. I was kind enough to not. He was doing us a favor by coming on the show. I certainly don't need to make his life worse. Talk about the draft. Talk about some of the prospects that the Rangers have in the system. We talk about Gabe Perreault. We talk about Liam Greentree. We talk about Scott Morrow. All the bits. We are going to go through that right now. That was recorded last week. To be fair, the whole show is thrown off from a timing perspective. So just keep that in mind. We're going to throw to Scott Wheeler right now, and then Chip and I will come back for, I think, the single question we have in the question thread, and then some NHL talk, which includes John Tortorella. And we are back with our guest, friend of the show, former SB Nation comrade in arms, currently the prospect guru over at The Athletic, Scott Wheeler. Scott, how are you?
I missed those PPP days. That was my beginnings. I was in first year university when I took over PPP, and we've come a long way from there.
You've come a long way from there. We got jettisoned. We at least kept the Blueshirt Bandwidth name, but you've gone on to the big time, my friend. Now it
was a good thing for a long time. SB Nation. There was a lot of good work.
It was a great thing for a long time. Like it was a lot of fun, and there was a legitimacy to it too. But you're in a better place. We're in a better place. But I do miss those days. Did you call it PPP? We always called it Pension Plan Puppets. I didn't realize it had like the acronym.
Yeah, I don't know. Pension Plan Puppets, PPP. Pension Plan Puppets was always a weird name for it.
It's a long name, yeah.
And the pension, like by the time I'd taken over the site, the pension plan had long since sold the team to
Right.
Bell and Rogers, right? So they weren't even the owners, but it kind of had that like rebellion kind of tilt to it. Like PPP always felt that way to me. Like stick it to the man. We're going to be critical of the team. So that part of it persisted, even though the people who started PPP were long gone by the time I sort of was in charge.
I mean, the banter was the same way. It was like we were the only people that were reporting that way. The Rangers obviously have always had a pretty aggressive public relations stance, especially at the time. And we were certainly not fan favorites. But you guys are a memorable site. Blue Jays Banter, which may still exist, the Blue Jays website for SB Nation, always because we were both banter and we had like this internal rivalry. But yes, those were good days. They were fun days. We had a lot of good collaborations and partnerships. And now you're back. You're back in the world. That's all that's important.
I'm just trying to imagine you, Joe, facing off with like a bunch of Blue Jays fans. Like, it's the Jets and the Sharks and West Side Story.
Dude, they're scrappy.
I believe it.
We, my brother-in-law is he does like an elite lacrosse camp every summer, and the Toronto teams that come down are like the scrappiest. They only wear pads, like, and they're pennies, so they're all like almost sleeveless. They have the best chirps, and they're just scrappy. I would never fight them. I'd lose. There was no way. I'm not doing it. You guys are up there in the north. It's always cold. I can't. And now we're in the northeast, and it's cold. I can't do it. I know my limitations. But anyway, thank you, Scott, for joining us. I think we should probably start with current Rangers. When we last spoke, we talked a lot about Perreault. Did not make the team out of camp, unsurprisingly. But to your point, Scott, you talked about a lot how he had to play on the power play, and you felt like there was an opportunity here. I feel like you're our strongest ally in the Perreault world because a lot of prospect people don't rank him as highly as you do. I think we've had the benefit the past few months of seeing like the beginnings of the Perreault that you've advocated for. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are. You got a pretty good look at him last night.
Yeah, we were watching the game after it was funny you were talking about the Toronto boys being a little rough. We were watching the game after my beer league game, which also got a little rough last night. And but we're on to the Toronto Trash Pandas are on to the ASHL finals, which is exciting.
Toronto Trash Pandas.
Yes.
What an amazing name.
So we were. I saw the second half of that Leafs Rangers game in the bar last night after our beer league game ended, and yeah, I mean, look, both of those teams are in shambles. Basically, is I think the only way to describe it. Gabe has been a bright spot, though. I know it's been a little hot and cold at times with Gabe this year, but when you watch him, you can see the playmaking. You saw that little flip saucer pass that he made last night, and some of there's just the feel on the puck. You guys know. I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but you guys know. Like I had Gabe 6th on my draft list in his draft year, and have not really wavered from that position. I think he's going to be a high-end offensive winger in the NHL. I think he's got a chance to be a 70-point player in the league. I think he's a better skater and competitor than he has ever been given credit for. He's also filled out a little bit. He's never going to be a super strong kid, but he's not the wiry sort of 5'9", 5'10" kid that he was when he entered the program anymore either. And I find I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but he'll track back and lift pucks, and he'll forecheck, and again, that's not the defining quality of his game, but he does those things well, and I think consistently well. And then on top of it, you've got this sort of real just offensive playmaking sense and feel on the puck that not a lot of players have, and I think that will carry him a long way. But with the right line mates in a top 6 role and on PP1, like I think you've got a real piece of the puzzle there.
I've been really impressed with recent Gabe Perreault. I think one of the major concerns that we had was when Perreault finally did get up. Sullivan's been a little hit or miss with some of the prospects, and we'll get to Scott Morrow in a minute, but he was not really utilizing Perreault the way that you and I had agreed would be the best way to use him, right? Put him in the top 6, give him top power play minutes. And there was a 4-week period there when JT Miller was hurt where Perreault was getting the top line minutes and the top power play minutes. And that's where he really kind of took off and was averaging a point per game for, I think, 5 or 6 games. And then JT Miller came back and he came off. Power play 1, still somehow scored a goal on power play 2. I made this point in my notes story today. The Rangers had 4 power plays against Toronto. Perreault played 38 seconds in those 4 minutes. So it's not great from that perspective. He did play 17 minutes of even strength, though, because he's playing on that top line still, and Sullivan's not removed him from it. The backtracking and forechecking is like a Sullivan staple of if you want to play hockey here, this is what you're going to do. So I agree with you. It's good for the long term. But, I mean, Eric, I'll let you jump in. We've been so pleasantly surprised that given the opportunity, Perreault's actually taken it and done things. On what should be noted is, to your point, you guys maybe called the Trash Pandas. The Rangers are truly the Trash Pandas. Like, what he's creating offensively is not because he's necessarily being carried by anyone on his line, although I do think Lafreniere has been really good as well, and so is Mika. He's actually creating things.
And they're going to need him. Like, there's going to be a post-Trocheck era. There's going to be a post-Mika era, frankly. I know he just played his 1,000th game. Like, these things are around the corner, and you can sort of see the way that this is sort of traveling. And as a result, like, they need him, and they need to find another premium guy in the draft this year, and they need to sort of lean harder into a bit of a rebuild here. And I know Drury has sort of pushed back on that repeatedly over the years, but it does feel like they need it, and they need to get better luck, frankly, than they got with Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere in hindsight. But it just has to be a priority. Like, I love Gabe, and Malcolm Spence is going to play games, and EJ Emery, we'll see, but EJ Emery probably plays games, and there are guys coming. None of them, and maybe even Gabe included, are true needle movers. Like, Gabe ideally is a number 3-4 forward on a contending team in the prime of his career. Like, he's not Panarin. He's not Adam Fox. He's not going to get to that level. And they need to find those guys, and they need to find young guys that can become that for them. And the only way really to do that in today's game is through the draft, because nobody hits free agency. And I know the Rangers continue to be a destination for guys in free agency, but it just feels like nobody gets there. So it's tough. And if you don't lean into it and you end up in this sort of mushy middle long term, I think that's a very dangerous place to be. And then suddenly it won't be Drury and co. who are in charge of it if that's the way it goes, and they get stuck in this terrible sort of in between. So I think they need to pick a direction, and it feels like, and maybe you guys disagree, but it feels like they haven't quite settled on what that is yet.
No, we agree.
We talked a lot about whether or not there's a plan, and it's not abundantly clear to us that there is a plan. My assumption is that internally there probably is something, but back to what Joe was saying earlier, that the Rangers are such a tight-lipped organization, and it's not as if Chris Drury is going to have a press conference and he's going to come out and say, this is what our plan is and this is how we're going to go about doing it. I do think it would be helpful if he could throw a little Easter eggs out there for everybody, to just give everybody the sense that there is a direction that they're trying to go. But I agree with Joe that what we have seen from Perreault this most recent time that he has been up with the Rangers has been pretty impressive. I've liked what we've seen. Scott, from your vantage point, given the well-documented history that the Rangers have had, and you refer to it as being unlucky with Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco, do you think it's just luck? I mean, we've had a lot of prospects in the Rangers organization that have petered out, that have not become what we thought they were going to become. Do you see anything different in the way that the Rangers are handling Gabe Perreault that suggests to you that maybe they have learned some lessons in the prospect development field from where they have failed previously?
I think it's a little too early to make any hard determinations one way or another on how they've handled him. Certainly, I would agree with the premise that it hasn't just been drafting, and that there seems to be a development piece of the puzzle that has been missing. And it's not just Alexi and Capo. It's Vitaly Kravtsov, and you go down the list. They just traded Brennan Othmann for a player who I think everybody would agree is a lesser player than Brennan Othmann. And I know Brennan Othmann isn't much of a player, but that is also on them, like Brennan and all the, like, it just seems like there's a longer list for them than there are for other teams, and other teams miss on guys. Like the Rangers are not this unique black sheep of development. Like other teams miss on guys at the draft, or sort of meddle with their development a little along the way, and things go south, or they don't get the right opportunities. That's part of the NHL. It's a complicated league to sort through. Coaches play a role in the types of players that they like. Sometimes that's at odds with when those players are truly ready. All of these things are tricky. Sometimes guys end up in the league too early, and from a maturity standpoint, they're not there. And I think Capo was a good example of that. Other times it just doesn't work out for one reason or another, but they need to make sure that guys do work out. Like as thin as the pool is, like Liam Greentree has to be a player. Malcolm Spence has to be a bottom six guy for you at some point. They can't, like EJ Emery cannot be a nothing. And there are times where I watch him play where it still feels like EJ is just so far away. I know Sikora played last night. Like it would be nice if he could become a piece, even if it's just a guy, or even if he's a 13th forward for you long term. Nathan Aspinall is a really, really nice story right now, and probably the story of their pool right now with the way that he's played in Flint. But you can't then get him to the AHL and have it be a 5-year thing, and then he's just a career AHLer. Like you got to find ways to help these guys take steps, to promote them at the right time, to put them in positions to succeed. And Gabe will be the most important case study for that, because he's the most important prospect. Like Gabe cannot be a 45-point PP2 winger that you just never quite figure out, and he shows flashes, but you're playing him 14 minutes instead of 18 or 19 minutes a night, and you're not allowing him to take that step, or he's not playing with the right line mates. Like he has to be, for me, priority number one until you bring in other pieces. Like in theory, whoever they pick this year is one of those pieces. But Gabe, like all those other guys, like EJ kind of is what he is. Malcolm Spence is what he is. Aspinall is the type of player that you just hope becomes a success story for you. Sakura is what he is at this point. Like all those guys, Dylan Garand, like they all kind of are what they are. Gabe's the one where like he can, not that he's going to move the needle for you as an organization by himself, but he can be more than just a piece. And if they mess that up, like head should roll kind of thing for me is how I would approach that.
A lot of people think head should roll right now. Very quickly on Asperol, you talked about him being a success story. What is a success story for him? Like if everything goes exactly, this is a guy that was not even on the map really in a lot of respects for a Rangers fan. Now, granted, I'm not anywhere near the prospect person you are. Usually I have my finger on the pulse of like guys to keep an eye on. Wasn't even on my list of people. So what is this? Are we talking about like at the best case scenario, a third line player with some pop? Is it a little bit more than that?
Well, Aspinall's interesting because Aspinall is not what you might think he is. Like at first glance, you see a 6'5" kid and you think, okay, net front on the PP, power forward, physical, wall game. That's what you typically expect. So it will be an interesting test, if you will, for the Rangers' development. Like if they try to shoehorn him into being that player, I don't think Nathan Aspinall becomes an NHL player. What if you watch Nathan with Flint, the things that Nathan has done well this year to have the breakout season that he has and to be one of the most productive players in the OHL on a good Flint team, a Flint team that has almost never been this good. It's an open ice. Like he makes plays in open ice. He wants the puck on his stick. He likes to shoot it. He's not at the net front on their power play. Like there's some different elements there. And there have been a few players that have kind of come through in that mold recently in the OHL. Kieran Walton is another one with the Sudbury Wolves, who's actually no longer with the Sudbury Wolves, but came through the Sudbury Wolves program, was drafted in the later rounds by the Winnipeg Jets, and is now he's a skill guy. Even though these kids are 6'5", 6'6", a lot of them are skill guys at lower levels rather than the sort of ground and pound big man that teams might want them to develop into as they sort of progress. So that part of it is interesting to me. He's not your sort of prototypical type for a player with his kind of size. Like he's not a super physical player. He's not like, that's just not his identity. And if they try to turn him into that, I don't think that's the best use of the player. The best use, ideally, to answer your question, is like a 15 to 20 goal real contributor. Like that's what you're hoping for, and you want him playing with some decent players. And he's going to have to like look, Aspinall's a late round pick. He's going to have to prove it in the AHL. He's going to have to climb the ranks. This isn't a like kid that you take out of the OHL and you give an NHL opportunity to. He's not that tier of prospect. But if they play even in the AHL, like he cannot. I don't think he's a bottom 6 AHL guy. Like I think when he turns pro, you're going to, for him to develop into the player that you need him to develop into, if he's going to become an NHL player, I think he has to be like a second line guy in the AHL kind of thing. So that will be interesting. And they have a lot of big guys. Obviously, Rempe gets all the attention, but Rubrick and Aspinall and Yaroslav and like they've got some big boys, but they don't all look the same. And so I'll be interested to see how they treat some of those players, because Aspinall in particular, like he's a skill guy in the OHL. He's not a role player. He's not playing off of his line mates. Like he's a focal point of his line, and that doesn't always translate up levels, and he's going to have to adjust his game. But I would hope that they don't view him as a project that they have to remake or turn into XYZ. Like just let him be him.
I know Joe wants to talk about Scott Morrow, but maybe we should dwell on one more of the prospects.
We can hold off on Morrow because
I want to hold off on Morrow because what I want to ask Scott about is Liam Greentree, who you've mentioned already. I feel that Ranger fans are unfairly down on Liam Greentree, and that mostly has to do with the context of it being the return for Artemi Panarin. And a lot of people seem to want to ignore the fact that Panarin had a no movement clause and at the end of the day did dictate exactly where he was going to go, which is inevitably going to bring down the overall return, even for an elite player like Artemi Panarin. But that's not to say that they should really feel down about Liam Greentree qua Liam Greentree. Comparatively, if they want to feel that way, I can't argue them out of it. But how should Ranger fans feel about Liam Greentree, and what can they expect from him in the near future?
Well, he's their second best prospect after Gabe. Like, I just released my Rangers pool ranking at The Athletic as part of my countdown this year, and like he's a better prospect than EJ and then Malcolm, and you go down the list. He's a good prospect. The challenge with Liam Greentree, and I hear about this all the time from Rangers fans, is the skating. And it's the same issue that Brennan Othmann had. It's the same issue, frankly, that Jacob Battaglia, who they've also acquired, has. Like it's below average from an NHL standpoint. Like if you're measuring Liam Greentree's feet relative to the average NHL top 9 forward. The rest is interesting. Like he was a captain at an early age. He's not like a super hard competitor. Like there have been questions over the years at times a little bit about just how competitive he is, but really strong kid, good size, pro body, can rip the puck. A lot to like about the skill level. He makes plays. Like he's a good prospect. I think he's going to be a middle 6 winger in the NHL. But the pace will be the determining factor in whether he reaches that. Like he's got the rest of the tools, the size, the skill. His production has stagnated a little bit in the OHL over the last couple of years. He's still one of the best players on one of the best teams in the OHL in Windsor. But there are elements of his game that just haven't progressed. And as a result, the sort of 90 to 100 point player that he was in his draft year is still 2 full seasons later, kind of the player that he is in that league. Like he's not a force. He's a high end player. Like he's one of the 10 or 15 best forwards in the OHL this year, but he hasn't become the 1 or 2 or 3 best forwards in the league. And for a kid who's now 19, that's kind of what you would expect out of a first round pick, that he's just like an undeniable top player in the league. And he just hasn't become that. He has struggled with Hockey Canada, obviously, over the years. That's well documented. He fell down the lineup at his U18 Worlds, which was a while ago, but also showed kind of the similar issues on Team Canada at this year's World Juniors, where the lack of pace just made it hard for him to play at that level. And he played a pretty limited role as a result and came out of the lineup and all of that. So interesting player. Like the talent is real. Like he's a 6'2" kid who's jacked and has skill, and that's already a really strong, interesting starting point. But he's got some imperfections as well, if you will.
It's fine. The Rangers do really well with guys who can't skate, so there's nothing to be worried about. And the joke I was going to make, where you were talking about,
honestly, there are some similarities
AHL.
with Battaglia too. Like go
ahead.
Yeah.
People want to hear you more than me here, so don't let me cut you off.
Jacob's the same. He's the same player. He's a 6'1", 6'2" kid who's ripped and has that sort of pro build and can absolutely fire the puck at an NHL level and has skill, and the feet are below average. Like that's who he is.
Yeah, the Rangers need to. They have a series of prospects and have had a series of prospects who have had this exact issue. You mentioned Othmann, and it's sort of where this turns into a little bit more of a, okay, well, what are we doing now type deal, where I think Eric and I actually talked about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, where like at some point somebody needs to look around and be like, this has been such an issue for this organization that somebody needs to do something different. And one of the bigger issues that we've run into that I've talked about is Sullivan at least has said a lot of the right things about Gabe Perreault and Scott Morrow to an extent about the way that he wants to develop them, the way he's thinking about it. Let's just call a spade a spade. David Quinn has no idea how to develop anyone. Gerard Gallant literally said it was not his job to develop players. And it was really clear that Peter Laviolette did not even want to be the head coach last year. So the expectation of like these guys to actually give a shit about these players, non-existent. So Sullivan has talked about not wanting to hurt the creativity of Perreault, letting him do what he wants to do. Those are the things that you want to hear. The point that you were making when you were talking about Asperall and then in a lesser extent, Rempe, the Rangers do a really good job giving guys opportunities who they think are big and tough. Like Adam Edstrom is sort of a developmental win for the Rangers. The problem is he's a fourth line player. Like those are the guys that you're getting out of it. They're really not doing a good job with the Kravtsovs or, the Kakos or the Lafrenières, although I'd like to talk about him for a second later because hopefully things are at least on the up and up there. But it does just kind of feel like we are at a point here where it's kind of shit or get off the pot in terms of high end talent. And you're right, the Rangers can't miss this year. So let's do a quick swap since you talked about it. The draft this year, the Rangers currently sit as of this podcasting second, so they'll have a 13.5% chance of getting the top overall pick. No one is catching Vancouver. How deep do you think that high end elite talent goes in the draft this year? Like if the Rangers fall to fourth or fifth, are they out of that bubble of where you would want to be for what you're talking about?
No, I mean, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for another premium winger, of which the Rangers have had no shortage of for a long time, then those two, like the Stenberg and McKenna will be gone. Like if you're drafting fifth or sixth and you want one of the premium forwards in this draft, which are the two wings for me, those guys will be gone. If you're looking for maybe not a true number one defenseman, but like a number two first pairing defenseman who runs your power play in the future and is a stud, maybe short of being like the Norris caliber player that Adam Fox has been for much of his career. If you want like that next piece of the puzzle on the back end, yes, a couple of those players will still be there. The centers are where it gets interesting. Like if they have their heart set on a center and they're drafting fifth or sixth, I think that Caleb Malhotra is probably gone by then or maybe picked right around then. And it feels to me like Tynan Lawrence is now going to go a little bit later, but I don't view either of Caleb Malhotra or Tynan Lawrence as the kind of player that the Rangers should be targeting. I know that there's always a desire for that sort of excellent two-way center. I worry with both of those players that you're getting an excellent two-way second-line center, and I just don't think that should be the focus that high in the draft, even if they maybe belong in that range in this class. And both of them are going to go early. Like I could see Caleb go as early as like third or fourth overall, Malhotra. Lawrence was in that conversation for a long time. I think Lawrence now likely goes sort of 5 to 10 somewhere. The U18 Worlds will be interesting. Caleb Malhotra plays on the best team in junior hockey in Brantford and could well be in the Memorial Cup. So people are going to continue to watch Malhotra in a high-stakes environment, but Tynan Lawrence is also going to be going to U18 Worlds with Hockey Canada. So you're going to see both of them. Ironically enough, they're actually both BU commits too. So the top two centers in this class will be playing together, likely on separate lines, obviously, next year at BU.
Worked out for the Rangers with Perreault.
Yes. Well, BC with Perreault, but
right. Leonard and Smith, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. Like I like if you're the Rangers and you miss out on the wings, and frankly with Lafrenière and Perreault, maybe you shouldn't be prioritizing one of the wings. But that sort of cornerstone D is going to be there. Like whether it's I'm lower on Keaton Verhoff than most. I think Keaton will go early still, but I've had reservations about Keaton back to U17s. He's an awesome player, and he's a summer birthday, so you give him a little bit more leeway and all that. He had a good season in college on a top team in North Dakota that may well go to the Frozen Four here this weekend. And I think we'll come out of that regional, frankly. But it's not just Keaton has dominated the conversation amongst the D because he was the top D presumptive sort of coming out of last year and even coming out of last summer with the way he played internationally for Hockey Canada at U18s and at Hlinka. But there are more names in that mix. Like I like Albert Smits a lot. I think Alberts is going to be an excellent NHL defenseman. I like Chase Reed a lot. I've got time for Carson Karls. Like it's a good group. of defensemen. They're all going to be very, very good NHL players. And that would, if the wings are gone, those would be my targets. Like, I just have the centers a little bit lower. Like the top two, the presumptive top two centers are 9 and 10 on my list, and I actually have another center, Viggo Bjork, ahead of them at 8 on my list. But that sort of 3 to 7 range is dominated by defensemen for me. So that's where I think if you're planning sort of your prep for the draft, I think that's where your focus should be as a Rangers fan. McKenna and Stenberg kind of are what they are. I think everybody's familiar with what kind of player you're getting out of those two at this point.
Are you talking about like the franchise-altering type players there at 1 and 2 in your mind?
No, like you're not talking about Matthew
McDavid.
Schaefer, Connor Bedard, Macklin McDavid is
It makes me sick to even
doesn't
hear
even
you say
exist in
Schaefer.
that.
I accept what you're saying about Schaefer. I just reject the notion that the Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, we've been spoiled. Look, the last 3
painful.
drafts, last year's draft, I actually thought was a weaker draft than maybe it looks like it is now. Like, I was so tired of watching those kids, and I wasn't sure about. I loved Schaefer and the talent, and he was one on my list, and he's a brilliant kid and just an unbelievable world-class skater and all of that. But with how little games he'd played and the collarbone injury and the mono and everything that went on with him, like, I didn't think, and nobody, frankly, in the NHL thought that he was going to set records this year in the NHL as a 18-year-old, barely an 18-year-old defenseman because of that September birthday. But the 2 drafts prior, like, we were spoiled. Like, if your measuring stick is 2023 and 2024 for any draft, I think you're going to more often than not be disappointed, because 2023 wasn't just Bedard. Like, it was Will Smith and Leo Carlsson and Adam Fantilli and Matvei Michkov, and it was just an excellent class. And 2024 was the same way. Like, it wasn't just Celebrini. You had all those D. You had Zane Parekh, and you had Sam Dickinson, and you had Carter Yakimchuk, and you had Anton Salayev and Zeev Boyum and Ivan Demidov and Artem Levshunov. Like, it was a really interesting collection of players. This group doesn't really feel that way. At least the forwards don't feel like that. They feel more, frankly, like the Demidov Michkov tier than they do the Bedard Celebrini tier. I am a bigger believer in McKenna than most. Like, McKenna frustrates the hell out of me with the one hand on the stick and the perimeter play and the lack of physicality and the lack of competitiveness and the lack of detail and all the reasons that NHL scouts wonder and worry about Gavin McKenna. I also wonder and worry about. But Gavin is a different tier of talent than Stenberg. Stenberg's a brilliant player, one of the most productive seasons in the history of the SHL for a draft eligible, right up there with the Sedins and the Naslins and that ilk. Like, brilliant, brilliant player. Deserves to go at the top of any draft class. Has been a dominant player internationally, but he doesn't wow you. With McKenna, you do get the wow factor with his ability to make plays. He's going to be an elite power play player in the NHL. 5-on-5, I think he's always going to have some warts, but still the playmaking will be there. So it's just is he going to be the competitive sort of heartbeat of your team? Is he going to be your captain? Absolutely. That's not who Gavin is. That's just not what he's going to be. He's not going to be the Austin Matthews or the John Tavares or the Connor McDavid. Like, forget the talent. He's not going to be a captain in the league. But Gavin is a special talent, and I think that always wins out. Maybe view him more as kind of that, like, Jack Hughes tier. But that's Jack is a center, obviously. Gavin's a wing.
Yeah, I'd also be okay with that.
Gavin's a wing, so there is a little bit of a devalue there that I think happens, and fair enough. Centers have more value, but he's pretty unique from a talent standpoint.
Briefly, because I want to make sure Joe gets his opportunity to talk about Scott Morrow. As you look a year or two down the road in the draft, we had mentioned that it's possible the Rangers are going into a rebuild and not a retool, which means there's a possibility of them picking very high for a couple of years here. As you're looking a year or two down the road, do you see the possibility of that kind of franchise-altering player being a year or two down the road in the draft, being a player like that?
I don't know. I think my answer would be I just don't know. Like, it's hard to handicap.
There is another first-round pick that the Rangers have this year that's likely going to fall into the late 20s, let's just say, at this point. Are there any, you really like the Mikkel Eriksson pick that the Rangers made last year, just in terms of a high risk. Like, one of the things that I will give Drury credit for is I don't think the old regime would have ever drafted Gabe Perreault. I think they would have thought he was too small. And granted, they probably would have drafted Charlie Stramel instead of Gabe Perreault if Minnesota didn't take him first, but we don't have to talk about that. Is there anyone that you think is really worth a high-end swing that's going to be on the back end of the first round this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting range. There's a top 12 on my list, clearly defined top 12. The only player from within that top 12 who I think might linger is a defenseman by the name of Ryan Lynn with the Vancouver Giants. Lynn is a player that I'm a big believer in. He's a 5'11" and a half defenseman, and we're coming out of a draft class in 2025 where there was not a single sub 6 foot defenseman drafted in the entire draft class, let alone in the first round. This year we have two kids who are quite likely going to go in the first round in Ryan Lynn and Xavier Villeneuve, who are high-end defensemen in this age group. And then we have two more in that sort of size range in Tommy Blyle and Axel Olofsson, who are going to go quite likely in the second or third round. So those are players that I'm always just curious about, because I always think when the league and that sort of pendulum, if you will, swings one direction, that there's sometimes a little pocket in the other direction where you can find good players. Lane and Cole Hudson being obviously the clearest examples of that in terms of this trend towards the rangy, skating 6'4" defenseman that everybody covets. These players, I'm not saying are Lane or Cole Hudson. Lane or Cole Hudson are unicorns. But I like if Lynn's available in the late teens or early 20s, Lynn will be like, I would be pounding the table to draft the kid. Like he's 5'11" and a half, and he maybe doesn't have that dynamic quality that Xavier Villeneuve in this draft class does have, or that the Hudson brothers have, or even that Zeev Boyum had to a certain degree. But Lynn is an extremely intelligent player. He's very competitive as a defenseman. He defends for a 5'11" and a half kid at an borderline elite level. So I'm a big proponent of Lynn. I like Villeneuve. There are two wingers. I think they're probably going to be gone by the range that you're talking about, but two Swedish wingers who I think have been overshadowed a little bit because Stenberg and Bjork have been at the forefront of the conversation out of Sweden. I like Marcus Nordmark and Elton Hermansson, who are kind of that next tier of Swedish player in this draft class. I do think they both probably go in the teens, but there's always a wing. Like there's always a winger who lingers. There's always a winger who lingers, and I could see one of those kids linger. There's also another winger in that range, Adam Novotny, who I think has sort of more pro attributes that teams are going to covet in the teens. So if the teams that are comfortable taking a winger in the teens take a Novotny and then take one of those Swedes, maybe the other Swede sort of lingers on draft day a little bit. Nordmark is a dynamic talent, like just a highly gifted player who has been, frankly, a ton of fun to watch with the national U18 team and is going to light it up at U18 Worlds. Has also been highly productive at the J20 level in Sweden and has played some pro games now. Hermansson played the entire year in the second-tier Hockey Allsvenskan and scored double-digit goals in a pro league this year, which is not an easy thing to do as a 18-year-old winger. Both very, very talented players. Like if they hit, they're a top 6 player for you. But teams are going to prioritize the D there. There's Malte Gustafsson and William Hawkinson and Juho Pipparainen, and there's a bunch of like safe D picks in that teens range. And as a result, I think some of the interesting wingers, or potentially one or two of the smaller D, could really linger. And if the Rangers were to walk away from this class with like an Albert Smits or a Chase Reed at the top in terms of that sort of premium D who has some more size, and then also nab a Xavier Villeneuve or a Ryan Lynn in that sort of second half of the first round, then suddenly you've got two excellent D prospects, like the two best D prospects you've had as an organization in a long time. And I'm higher on both those players than I was on Braden Schneider in his draft year, for example. That's suddenly you've got something to work with in terms of building a really strong blue line of the future there. So there's different ways that it could go. Maybe they end up with a D and one of those wingers. The centers tend not to be there. Like the centers who can actually play tend not to sort of linger into the 20s. Which team do they have?
We get the better of Carolina or Dallas's pick that is both top 10 protected. So
yeah,
my gut is telling me both of those teams are going to be at least flirting with the conference finals in both of their respective brackets. And you're looking at now, Carolina's impressed us before.
There's a chance Dallas loses in the first round with the way that the Central
would be wonderful.
But there's also a chance that Carolina loses early on.
I was going to say Carolina's
goaltending has been unreliable
they're
the team that. Yeah, they're the team that until they prove it to me in the playoffs, I just don't believe in them.
And despite the win-loss record, I'm not sold on Brandon Bussey.
Neither am I, actually. Goalies are voodoo in general, but him getting that contract on the back of 20 games, basically, we've had tons of complaints about what the Rangers did with, Will Borgen and whatnot. Probably a good transition. I don't want to keep you too long, Scott, to Scott Morrow. We talked a little bit about him before the season last year. Obviously, things have not played out in a great way for him. A lot of the things that you talked about being concerned about, the defensive ability, some of the stupid mistakes have come. Now, in defense of the other piece, would have been really nice when Adam Fox was injured and Scott Morrow was playing for him to actually quarterback the fucking power play instead of Vladislav Gavrikov. I can't fathom what the reasoning was to not at least see what you have in him, but I'm starting to get a little scared, and I don't think you're going to talk me off the ledge, but what have you seen so far?
I don't watch all 82 games of the Rangers, but from the Rangers,
don't do it. By the way, if you can, don't do it. Just don't do it.
I still watch. I watch a ton of the league, and I'm a voting member of the PHWA, so it's my responsibility. I think to watch everybody as best I can. From what I've seen, I still think he's close. Like whenever I've watched him in the AHL, he looks like he's there. He looks like he's taken some steps in terms of some of the reads and the decision making and how free flowing he was as a player first in high school and then in college, although he buttoned up in college over time a little bit as well. He's like, I always thought about him and Logan Mailloux as a little similar. Logan Mailloux's more of a physical specimen, but just in terms of that, like Brent Burns, like a little bit of a forward mentality as a player. Like but it comes with some mistakes. Like people forget, Brent Burns he gave up a ton back the other way early in his career, even when he was a top defenseman in the league. And that's kind of how I viewed him. I've viewed them like they just have, not that Morrow has this sort of physical makeup of a Brent Burns or like that Dustin Byfuglien type that's just like kind of all over the place, and for better or worse, you live and die with it. But that was his game, certainly in high school and early on in college. I do think he's made efforts to tighten it up a little bit, but it's the same conversation we had. Like you don't want him to tighten it up too much, almost. Like he needs to be himself. And all due respect to Vladislav Gavrikov, like there's no reason from a talent standpoint, forget who the better NHL player is and the veteran, like from a talent standpoint, Morrow should be given an opportunity to play the role that he needs to play in the NHL. And that's running one of your power plays. And like it just, that's a head scratcher for me that he hasn't been given that opportunity. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea. There were even character questions about him early on in his career, and there's been a lot that has gone on with Scott, and I do think he's made important enough progress that you have to give him at some point you just have to give these guys, and this would have been the season to do it. You have to give some kid 20, 30 games and just you live and die with him. And maybe that sends the wrong message to your veterans who are playing better hockey and whatnot, but you have to figure it out. Artie Levshunov, same thing in Chicago. Like, Artie has no idea how to play hockey, and Artie's like, that's not who Morrow is. Like, Morrow knows. Artie is like a chicken with his head cut off out there, and Morrow is not that, but at least in Chicago, they're figuring it out with those guys, and it's been a process, and I'm sure it's hard on some nights for the coaching staff there, but they're figuring it out. They're figuring it out with Frank Nazar. They're figuring it out with Nick Lardis. They've started Anton Frundell on the first line. Like, you have to eventually make that commitment as an organization to some of these kids, or you're just spinning your tires. So, we'll see. Like, and frankly, I know Zach Jones never worked out, but I don't think Zach necessarily got a fair shake either, right? And you got to give the kids a look at some point. And I was happy to see Sikora get a look last night. And but you got to give them some runway to figure it out. And maybe you ultimately come to the decision at the end of that runway that Scott Morrow isn't for you. And same with Zach Jones, and you go down the list, Brennan Othmann. But you're better coming to that decision if you've eliminated all doubt than if you flirt with it and they're underutilized and you just say, this kid doesn't have a role on our team. He doesn't have a fit on our team. Well, if you don't give him that look, that real look, then you never really are sure of that decision in the end. And maybe that kid goes somewhere else. And I don't think Brennan's going to burn the Rangers. But you could see a player like Morrow maybe figuring it out somewhere else, right?
Do NHL head coaches just like make very quick assessments of guys like this? Because it seemed from the beginning that Mike Sullivan just did not have any time for Scott Morrow. And there's, previously in Rangers history, there's some disconnect between drafting and scouting and development and the coaching staff in terms of what kind of players they want and how they want to utilize them. That's been a mess previously. But you would think that hopefully there would have been a little bit more alignment there. I mean, is it just kind of a case where certain NHL head coaches will, even after, I don't know, what Morrow had maybe 10 games or 15 games this year, would just be like, I've seen enough, and like kind of like that quote in Moneyball, I like him, but I can judge him, and first base is the moon to him. It's like they just decide instantly.
I think every coach is different, but I do think certainly it happens around the league, especially with young players. You see it all the time. Kids sort of having that rebirth somewhere else, figuring it out somewhere else. But you also see it all the time where that first impression that folks have of someone is maybe the right one. Like I was just watching some Belleville games yesterday or the day before, and like Arthur Kaliev is a player that just everybody made a quick determination on. And in hindsight, he was probably just an AHL scorer, right? Like and maybe that's what Morrow is. Like, maybe Morrow's the high-end offensive, skating, freewheeling AHL defenseman that just is, you can maybe call up here and there and insert into your lineup, and he gives you a bit of a different look. The challenge with players like that and players who are in that type, whether you're an Arthur Kaliev who has to score or a Morrow who has to be on the power play, is that it does limit the number of roles that you can play on a team. I would certainly subscribe to the idea that you don't have to have just two guys who can run your power play on your roster, and your third pair does not have to be the hard, physical, stay-at-home types who are safety nets for you. I understand that coaches need certain roles on their teams, but I also think good coaches get the most out of just talent, and they figure out ways to fit guys in based on talent. And I know the Devils are having a really tough year, but I've always respected Sheldon Keefe for that. Like, he's not beholden to, my fourth line has to look like this, my third pair has to look like this. And sometimes that means that his teams don't work, and it doesn't all fit together because you don't have the right roles, but at least there's experimentation and there's the potential for something more. And other teams have done, like, there's some teams that have done that. I think Dallas is a testament to finding guys who are atypical, who aren't for Jason Robert. Like, people hated Jason Robertson in his draft year in Niagara. People thought he was soft. He couldn't skate. He was a low effort big man that wasn't the power forward that he needed to be at his size to have success in the NHL. And they just trusted that Jason Robertson was smarter than that and that he was going to figure it out because of his talent. And now Jason Robertson's been a top line player, and they drafted Logan Stankoven, another player who just didn't really fit the mold. And I know Logan's no longer with Dallas and he's obviously in Carolina, but Carolina's another organization like that, right? Like Carolina has guys of all different shapes and sizes, and Rod Brindamore just figures it out. Like, and sometimes guys don't work out there and they don't get into Rod's lineup too. But at least you know that Rod is not ruling guys out for some preconceived notion of how his roster should look. He might rule a guy out because he doesn't like the player, or he doesn't like his mix on a certain line. But he's not starting at a point where the line is the be all and end all, and the line has to have a certain shape. And there are certainly coaches that I think do that.
All right, last question. You brought up Malcolm Spence. Any not like out there prospect that the Rangers that you think is just having a really good year right now? So like not Perreault, not Morrow, obviously, because maybe he's not, but talking about some of the guys you mentioned before, feels like Spence is probably the answer based on what you've said, but I'll leave it to you.
I don't think Spence had
I guess.
Yeah, Aspinall. I don't think Spence had a great year. He had a great start. Like the first 3-4 weekends of Michigan season, Spence was one of their best players. And then he kind of just more settled into like a middle six role on that team and was a good player and forechecked. And the one thing that Spence has that some of these other players we've talked about don't have is he's a good skater. He goes northwest and he forechecks and he's an athlete. And that piece just makes him a little unique in their pool. I don't know that there's any sort of hidden gems there, though. Like if you read my list earlier this week, like once you get through those top few names, I mean, Aspinall's obviously interesting. Aspinall's compelling. But a lot of those guys like Rubric and you get further down the list, like a lot of them just kind of are what they are, and I don't think there's going to be any like surprise guy who emerges there. You mentioned Eriksson off the top. I have a soft spot for Eriksson. Eriksson probably just becomes, if I'm being honest, like a top 6 AHL scorer who never really plays many NHL games. Like I like the talent. I've really enjoyed watching Eriksson play. He's been a bright spot on some really bad international teams with Norway, and he creates a ton of looks and a ton of chances for himself. And I like the player, but he's a 5'11", 6-foot forward who is not a first or second round pick, and those guys always have a tough time becoming more than sort of SHL, KHL, AHL top 6 guys. So that I've got a fondness for him as a player, and I think he was a very good player in his age group. I'm not sure what he is still. You got to make sure that one of those bigger guys like a Rubric or an Aspinall, like you got to make sure. I think ideally one of those guys makes it for you, and then you got to make sure that EJ and doesn't become nothing, because EJ is the one I worry about. Like he's an excellent skater, and the body has just never come to match that, despite having the length. Like he's just never filled out, and he doesn't play particularly hard, really hard at all. And the offense has never come there. And so ultimately you've got a kid who can really skate and play in transition both ways. But other than that, what is he? He's not a super hard defender. He's never going to create much offense. He's the one where I've watched him play a few times this year, and like he's not even I wouldn't even qualify him as a top 4 defenseman on his college team. And so, yeah, that's one I do worry about, because the clock's starting to tick. Like he's going to be a junior next year, and typically guys get signed after their junior year, right? So, and he doesn't feel ready for that for me. So,
yeah, the lack of offense was always a concern too. Not that he's an offensive defenseman at all, but like I think you were the one that said this to me actually. Can't have 1 assist in a year, right? Like something's not right there. It's funny because
although Dean Letourneau had that a year ago, and now Dean Letourneau is lighting up college hockey. So maybe you can.
Maybe, I guess. It doesn't usually work out like that for the Rangers. We'll let you go, but it's funny because I was shocked the Rangers were as high as 18th on your rankings. I thought they were going to be worse. Eric and I actually joked last week. It's surprising that there's other teams that have worse farm systems than the Rangers.
Go look at Dallas and Florida and some of those teams. They're like, I'm scraping to get 6 or 7 names on the list, let alone the 15 or whatever that were on the Rangers list.
But at least Florida, like, they have the cup, so it kind of makes sense. Like, I would accept the Rangers being dead last if they won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, but they haven't.
The correlation between having a very successful NHL team, which both of those, or at least until this year, Florida did and Dallas does, is that's one thing. To be bad and have a bad farm system is woof.
But thank you so much for joining, Scott. Scott Wheeler from The Athletic. Anything you want to plug in particular?
No, just the pool rankings, which are still rolling out. Obviously, the Rangers are already out. So for your listeners, check that out if you haven't. And
we'll put that in the show notes.
We'll be right into, as soon as I'm done with these pool rankings, we'll be right into Frozen Four and Memorial Cup and U18 Worlds and getting back on the road. And I'm excited for that because I took some time off with the kid and haven't traveled the last month or two. And now I'm going to have like 6 or 7 trips here in a 2 months, 3 month span. So I'm looking forward to finishing out the draft year strong and sort of finalizing my list for this class. And I got some really cool stories on some of these kids coming, some really interesting sort of human stories on a couple of these kids that I'm excited to tell that haven't been told yet. So keep an eye out for that for some of the draft eligible kids.
Yeah, Scott always does incredible work. I linked a lot of these stories when the trade happened, but if you haven't read his review on Liam Greentree from last year, you should definitely do that. It's just a really good deep dives on some of these players, and hopefully we're reading similar stories about, Gavin McKenna at some point over the summer, but we need the lottery gods to be with us, and typically that doesn't happen. So thank you, Scott, for joining. You should be following him. You should be paying attention to him if you're not, and we'll see you on the other side of the transition. And we're back. I love talking to Scott, genuinely. It always blows my mind that you can ask him about any prospect from like the past 5 years. You're talking about 1,000 players, and there's a 99% chance he's got a scouting report on one of those players. Truly incredible.
He is the number one resource I look to when doing my trade proposal columns and looking for any sort of information on what a team's prospects have, or what a team has in its prospect pool. He's just amazing, and his write-ups are usually spot on and fair, and he tells it like it is.
And I think gave some good perspective on Scott Morrow, certainly some good perspective on Liam Greentree, the Gabe Perreault situation, just kind of where the Rangers are in general. Always good to hear it from an outside perspective and somebody that I really trust. So, all right, let's get to a little bit of NHL news now. Did you have on your bingo card John Tortorella? First of all, I have so much ADD that I interrupt myself with different thoughts. We talk and have talked about the drama of the NBA and how the NHL can use more of that drama, get into the news cycle a little bit more, some crazier trades, like the whole shebang. A playoff team firing their Stanley Cup winning head coach with 8 games left in the regular season to throw John Tortorella into the fold with 8 games left in the regular season on what I think is an interim contract, correct? Like Tortorella is just through the end of this year?
Just through the end of this year in the playoffs.
I love it. I love everything about this.
I don't get it. I feel like
I'm not saying I get it. I'm not saying I would have done it. I'm saying I love it. I am the biggest John Tortorella supporter you will find, as long as John Tortorella is not coaching my hockey team as the head coach.
Yeah. I want him nowhere. I understand the appeal to him. I want him nowhere near my hockey team. He has, I was arguing with people yesterday on the thread about this. If you look, John Tortorella has not been a winning coach since leaving the Rangers. I think the highest his teams have finished is 3rd, and he did that once since leaving the Rangers. Winning teams do not hire John Tortorella. John Tortorella is usually brought in as a sideshow or something like that. Philadelphia Flyer fans have to hate watching Cutter Gauthier scoring goals for Anaheim because he didn't want to play for John Tortorella. Um, I don't understand what the end game here is for Vegas. But I will say that if he sticks around beyond this year, my money is going to be on Mitch Marner asking for a trade out of town and Brady Tkachuk going the other way in the deal.
You got to save those things for the paying members. We can't just bring that stuff up right now. I love, so from what's coming out about this right now, it appears that there was growing discontent between the players and Bruce Cassidy last year that rolled over through the offseason, that continued through this season. Vegas obviously backed the coach, and then whatever happened, I truly wonder what the instigating event was to lead to this moment where, again, you're 8 games away from the playoffs. You're going to make the playoffs. And it's not like you're bringing in you know what, I shouldn't say that. Tortorella's a tough coach, but he's like, the players love Tortorella. Tortorella, he wears out his welcome, but like when he first gets there, and like those guys love John Tortorella. It's just
Brandon
a mixture of things you'd never expect.
I saw someone last night go, Butch Cassidy was too hard, or Bruce Cassidy was too hard, so they went to John Tortorella. That's who you go to when you're looking for warm and fuzzy, is John Tortorella. Like, if Cassidy had worn out his welcome, fine. I would have promoted one of his assistants or something like that. I don't know, other than I don't know what Tortorella can bring to a team in 8 games that makes hiring him make sense. Yeah, a different voice, but you know, I saw some of his post game from last night. He said he didn't realize it, but he was calling Nick Dowd by the wrong name all night long because he didn't know who he was. Like, you don't know, and he knows Jack Eichel from Team USA. He knows a couple of the other players, but he doesn't know any of the guys on this team. And you know, good luck. That's all I got to say is good luck.
I'm so here for this.
Yeah, one way or another, it's going to be it's
great theater.
There's going to be drama. It's great theater. It is great theater.
Great theater. And he may earn himself another coaching gig out of this. And it's not like Vegas doesn't have high aspirations for themselves. Like they think and should think highly of themselves. So I find this very, very, very interesting. So interesting. The other big news, which I think Scott Wheeler alluded to, if I remember this correctly, or maybe we talked about it in the green room after the show. The Maple Leafs have made a change. Mm-hmm. Chip, I got to give you credit. Never say it to your face, but I'll say it to you over Zoom. You don't know what number Rick Nash wears, but you absolutely nailed the Leafs bottom dropping out this year.
Oh my God. Even I didn't think it was going to be that bad.
So Trevelling is fired. The search for his replacement begins, I guess, immediately. Mm-hmm. Chip, this is your show. This is the Toronto Maple Leafs downfall is yours. By all means, go ahead.
I love it. And, you know, a lot of people are talking about Doug Armstrong because he's the GM of Team Canada. I don't know why Doug Armstrong would want to leave St. Louis to go be the general manager of Toronto. Toronto is a lot farther away from contending again than St. Louis is. My hope and prayer, because I want to see Toronto completely implode at this point, is Brian Burke. I want them to pull Brian Burke out of dust and put him back into a GM role and just watch it go so much worse.
They might. Peter Chiarelli, Marc Bergeron.
Can we talk about the fact that Nashville is looking at these guys? I do not ever want to hear anybody again say, fire Chris Drury because I don't care who his replacement is. It cannot be worse than Chris Drury. It abso-fucking-lutely can. Peter Chiarelli, Marc Bergevin are terrible. You know, Brad Treliving, Brendan Shanahan before him. those guys could not. They destroyed a Toronto Maple Leafs team that had 3 all-world talents in Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and William Nylander. Stan Bowman is destroying an Edmonton team that has, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. This is not a defense of Chris Drury. Chris Drury has never had that kind of talent. He has done bad things for the Rangers. He has never had the kind of talent that those guys have wasted. So please do not tell me it can't be worse than Chris Drury. It objectively can be and would be.
That is the critical piece of this. We've made the argument before on this podcast that the Rangers, like, be careful what you wish for, basically, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's behind door number 2. And a few people have astutely pointed out, and they're 1,000% correct. If you know something's broken and it's not working, not making a change because you're scared that things might get worse is stupid business. And they're right.
Yes.
It is stupid. Like, the people who pointed that out literally stopped me in my tracks. Like, you're 100% correct. No arguments here. However, the argument that it could not be worse than Chris Drury, buddy, yes, it can.
Yep.
And you're about to see Nashville go from could it be worse than Barry Trotz to hiring Peter Chiarelli? Yeah, dude, it could be worse than Barry Trotz.
And if you look at Dolan's history, the 3
you're not
most
gonna like who's
likely
behind door number 2.
Exactly. The most likely candidates behind door number 2 are Ryan Martin, who's the assistant GM, Jed Ortmeyer, who's the director of player development, or Brendan Shanahan, who could not figure out how to win with Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and Mitch Marner. So, and he didn't even draft. I think he drafted Marner and Matthews. Nylander he was handed. Matthews was the consensus pick when he had the fortune of picking 1 overall. It would be worse with any one of those 3 guys.
I think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting that these things are happening like now, that not even letting him finish the season with Toronto is, I think, just a statement of how bad they think it is. And I don't blame them. Like, I don't disagree with their assessment, but Eric and I have talked about this a lot, about how it's like, it could be worse elsewhere. It's bad with the Rangers. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things wrong with this team. We could be heading into Toronto Maple Leaf territory next year, depending on where things sit with Vincent Trocheck and the like. But I just think I like the drama
Yes.
that the NHL is building. And it's something that the NBA has done so well and just sort of become part of the, culture of the NBA in a sense. Like, these things happen in the NBA. I'm pretty sure, didn't the Denver Nuggets fire their general manager or maybe their coach before the playoffs last year, if I'm not mistaken? I could be wrong, but I think they did. I listened to enough Bill Simmons that I should know. But, like, this stuff happening in the NHL, totally here for it. Could not be more here for it.
So I think the guys on Sportsnet last night were saying that part of the reason it might have happened now is because Treliving went to ownership and said, "Look, I'm hearing all these rumors. You're going to get rid of me. Just don't leave me hanging out here." And they're like, "Okay, fine, get gone." And then the other theory is that Nashville announcing that they're interviewing guys like Chiarelli and Bergevin, Toronto didn't want to be left out on those guys, which, God, I would love that. Put Chiarelli in one place and Bergevin in the other.
As long as it's not my team.
As long as it's not
happening
my
to
team.
me.
Yep.
All right. You guys have got an hour and a half. Actually, more than that, probably, because this show in and of itself is 50 minutes. But
Nice.
I think Scott was 45, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, thank you, Scott Wheeler, for joining. Scott Wheeler at The Athletic. The Rangers ranked 18th in his prospect rankings. You can read that if you are a subscriber. Honestly, it's worth subscribing to The Athletic just for Scott. I'm not just saying that. There is not a more respected or more intelligent prospects guy in the NHL than Scott Wheeler. BlueShirtBanter.com. Get all of your ad-free access to the New York Rangers for $85 a year. You could read stories like the shitty trade proposal that Chip just posted up about Brady Tkachuk. Or said, I should say. He's going to write about it now because he has to. I don't pay him no money not to write about things for us. $40 a year will get you the Discord access and access to the question threads, which we obviously could not answer today because we had to record it at a different time. Please listen to us on Spotify, 5 stars, leave a nice review, say nice things, leave 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to us, you can watch us. YouTube.com/BlueShirtBanter, Facebook.com/BlueShirtBanter, BlueShirtBanter.com/BlueShirtBanter. Chip, anything before we get the hell out of here?
Wonderful Easter, Joe. Happy Passover to everybody. Enjoy your weekend.
Easter is coming up, isn't it? Holy shit. God, time goes fast. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining. We will see you next week.